America has a new president, but will Joe Biden's policies unite a fractured country? Political commentator and chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt SCHLAPP, is here with analysis. And later, former Democratic Congressman Dan Lipinski and president of the Susan B. Anthony list, Marjorie Dannenfelser, discuss the future of the pro-life movement under a new president, who's also a practicing Catholic. Finally, the persecution of Christians by Islamic extremists in Africa continues. How will the new administration address what many are calling a genocide? The Hudson Institute's Nina SHEA is here with an update. The World Over begins right now.
Now, Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. An important show for you tonight. Matt SCHLAPP, Dan Lipinski, Marjorie Dannenfelser, and Nina SHEA are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Only nice comments will be entertained. Lots to cover this week. But first, a few thoughts. This has been a particularly nasty election season, with American turned against American, Catholic against Catholic. And even post-election, some are calling for the cancellation and eradication of those they disagree with politically. Well, the time for politics is over. Taking up the new president's call for unity, we should talk for a moment about the unity of faith. This is not about getting along or coming together under some false construct, but of unifying around the articles of faith that define Catholicism. Now, Joe Biden is now the second Catholic president, a fact that has been advertised repeatedly during the campaign and again this week.
Moses is freeing us from 400 years of back-breaking Egyptian slavery at the hands of an autocratic, cruel Pharaoh. In many ways, dear Joe, you are our Moses.
I would say that for me, the significance of it is that Joe Biden is a practicing Catholic, and that he brings the very best of what it is to be Catholic to his leadership.
We're going to see a lot of faith and religion in his life, because that has been his life.
Joe Biden, a faithful Catholic, a devout Catholic, and he's not afraid to show it.
All of this presents the bishops and all Catholics with a challenge. President Biden is a professed church-going Catholic, one who supports abortion on demand, which the bishops in a new letter to Biden define as a moral evil and their top priority. He has also promised to rescind religious freedom protections and supports what the Pope has called gender ideology, which seeks to, quote, erase sexual differences found in creation. Now, politicians can govern as they see fit, and they can even support gravely evil policies. That's their prerogative. And while they're free to remake parties and platforms, they are not free, nor are their supporters, to remake Catholicism. It is now up to the bishops and the whole church to determine what they are willing to tolerate from professed Catholics. I thought there were prohibitions for publicly engaging and encouraging intrinsically evil acts. If creating scandal and promoting sinful acts are no longer a problem, let's all run down to the jewelry store and grab all we can. If attending Mass and carrying rosary beads are excuses from the commandments, why not? Stealing's a lot less sinful than, say, killing a child or encouraging it. If the church wants to retain its moral voice, she must reclaim her teaching, declare it, and convince her children of the truth. And as we'll discuss later, the bishops must also be willing to risk offending even powerful politicians in the name of saving souls, perhaps even the elected officials' souls.
The dream of justice for all will be deferred no longer. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism, that we must confront and we will defeat. To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity.
That was President Joe Biden at his inauguration this week in a heavily fortified D.C. For analysis and what we've seen in the first days of this new administration, we're joined by the chairman of the American Conservative Union, Matt SCHLAPP. Matt, thanks for being here. Your thoughts on President Biden's call for unity and unifying the nation? Obviously, unity is crucially important, but will the Biden policies get us there?
Yeah, this is the problem. You know, President Trump ran as a disruptor, and in some ways, he was seen as a divisive figure because he wanted to call out some of the major public policy problems that were emanating from Washington, D.C. Joe Biden has run on a unifier, but his words aren't matching up because he wants to unify us while he cancels those of faith, cancel those from the conservative side. The Democrats are going forward with impeachment and conviction of Donald Trump in the Senate. So I think half the country feels like they are being persecuted for their beliefs. That's simply not unifying.
Is it wise to accuse half of U.S. voters of being racist and political extremists, as is happening here, and really throughout the culture in various ways?
This was this unbelievable approach that Hillary Clinton had when her people called Catholics irredeemable, and they called Trump supporters, she called Trump supporters deplorable. You know, it's very strange in politics to slur the voters you seek to support you, and this is the problem that Joe Biden has, which is if he wants to unify this country, stop coming after us. Tell the Democratic Party, enough with impeachment. It's just a distraction, and it takes time away from the important public policy issues. Don't take nuns to court. Don't attack people for their faith. Don't try to tell people that believe that there are men and women, that there's something hateful about that. That's how he could actually help to unify the country. I just don't see the policies coming that would do that.
Well, President Biden wasted no time getting down to business. On day one, he issued a slew of executive orders, 17 of them, including rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, rejoining the World Health Organization, a mask mandate on federal property, halting deportations and the building of the wall at the border, and ending the travel ban on predominantly Muslim countries deemed terrorist threats. Are these just knee-jerk attempts to roll back Trumpism or what's considered his agenda?
Yeah, so what I would say is you can't have it both ways. You have so many people across the country saying they didn't like Trump the man, but his policies worked and were very popular. And now what you have in the Biden administration is kind of a death knell at the center of these Trump policies, which brought in record numbers of Hispanics and African Americans to support Donald Trump. A lot of union workers and blue-collar working class people supported Donald Trump. Think about the Keystone Pipeline. We can look at that as energy. But if that was your job, if you're one of the 1,000 families that don't have a paycheck because that project was stopped, by the way, those are hard hat jobs, union jobs, it doesn't sound very unifying to them.
Well, I mean, just on the border wall question, arrests are down 70% in the Yuma sector due to that wall. Border agents actually requested this, and we're talking about mostly Hispanics. Well, I was down there. I've been down there a number of times. Those are Hispanic border agents. Why ignore this science, if you will, the statistics we're seeing coming just in that isolated instance of the security at the border and how this has contributed to saving those the border agents' lives?
Not just the border agents, but the communities, right, Raymond, around them. You know, this is actually cruel to the people who we almost have a magnet trying to attract them to come to the border because we're giving them this hope that they'll become legal American residents. And it creates great humanitarian hardship on those people, on the communities around the border. You know, they're already the Biden administration is already setting up tent cities. Once you have to set up the tent cities because everybody rushes the border, you have this question about what do you do with children? What do you do with families? Joe Biden is really just replaying the same tape we've seen many, many, many times. Nobody is going to come out ahead with these policies of weakness in a porous border.
Another action that President Biden signed on day one, as we mentioned earlier, was an executive order to prevent discrimination on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation, erasing differences between the sexes. This will presumably allow biological males to compete with women in athletics and vice versa. Your thoughts on this and how this is going to play?
Well, look, I just think this comes down to some common sense. The Democratic Party loves to put up signs that say, we believe science is science. I think they're finger wagging at us on climate change, people who have my politics, but then you see the idiocy of saying there's something scientific about saying a baby in the womb isn't a baby. And now you have this kind of insanity and unscientific idea that somehow we don't have chromosomes and you can wake up on Tuesday and make decisions on your gender. I don't belittle the people who have these struggles in their personal lives. Actually, I have compassion for them. But we have to mark and understand what we learned in third grade in science, Raymond. And if we're going to chuck all that kind of like truth, what's the next thing that we all will be browbeaten into accepting? We're on a road that's very dangerous once you start chucking out science and truth and the facts as we clearly know them.
Much was made this week about Biden's Catholic faith, Matt. Rabbi Michael Beals in Delaware even went so far as to compare Biden to Moses. White House Secretary Jen Psaki had an interesting exchange with EWTN News' Owen Jensen regarding taxpayer funding of abortion. Listen.
Two big concerns for pro-life Americans. The Hyde Amendment, which of course keeps taxpayer dollars, as you know, from paying for abortions, Medicaid abortions, and the Mexico City policy, which under the previous administration they expanded to keep tax dollars from overseas paying for abortions. So what is President Biden planning on doing on those two items right now?
Well, I think we'll have more to say on the Mexico City policy in the coming days. But I will just take the opportunity to remind all of you that he is a devout Catholic and somebody who attends church regularly. He started his day attending church with his family this morning, but I don't have anything more for you.
Matt, what does going to church have to do with this policy?
Well, this is obviously a very dangerous potential scandal here. I mean, I welcome the idea that Joe Biden, who entered the Senate as a pro-life candidate and supported the elimination of Roe v. Wade for a short time as a senator until he reversed course and he's never kind of looked back. He's chucked out his support of the Hyde Amendment that limits taxpayer funding of abortion. It's rumored that he's going to allow American taxpayer money to flow through international organizations to advocate for abortion. But just think of this. Was Jen Psaki telling Catholics that Joe Biden is actually rethinking these radical positions from the campaign he just waged, or semi-waged? It was a strange campaign. If he's going to do that, of course we would all applaud him for that, for taking the moral and Catholic consistent policies of life. But what I fear is that was just an artful dodge to get through the very first press conference with the only tough question that she had to take, and that Joe Biden, unfortunately, will continue with his hostility towards life. But hey, I guess anything's possible. I'm hoping for this political miracle.
Well, the U.S. Catholic bishops, led by Archbishop Jose Gomez, issued a strong and cautionary message for the inauguration. They said this: I must point out that our new president has pledged to pursue certain policies that would advance moral evils and threaten human life and dignity most seriously in the areas of abortion, contraception, marriage, and gender. Of deep concern is the liberty of the church and the freedom of believers to live according to their consciences. For the nation's bishops, the continued injustice of abortion remains the preeminent priority. Matt, given Joe Biden's self-proclaimed Catholicism, is this a battle, or is there a battle brewing between the church and the president here?
Yeah, I think there's a battle brewing between bishops who want to steadfastly stand up for the fundamental dogmas of the church and those bishops who might fit more conveniently within the Episcopalian Church. There is a real battle brewing. It's a battle we need to have. I applaud those bishops, even bishops who might have some different politics from people like me, who are willing to stand up for these fundamental doctrines and do it in a compassionate but yet very strong way. It's what our young people need. Our young people who are trying to navigate in this really confusing society, they need to hear it from their bishops. Raymond, if they don't hear it from their bishops, why should we expect that 14-year-old, 15-year-old, or 16-year-old to stand up in their classrooms and espouse these ideas? I mean, this is a real critical moment for our society. I applaud those bishops who are pushing back on the Vatican's timidity here.
Well, not all the bishops were on board with this statement, Matt. Cardinal Blaise Cupich of Chicago, along with an unnamed Vatican official, issued a rare rebuke via Twitter of the conference's statement. Cardinal Cupich wrote, "Today, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued an ill-considered statement on the day of President Biden's inauguration. Aside from the fact that there is seemingly no precedent for doing so, the statement, critical of President Biden, came as a surprise to many bishops who received it just hours before it was released. The statement was crafted without the involvement of the administrative committee. The internal institutional failures involved must be addressed, and I look forward to contributing to all efforts to that end." Matt, why is there this division among the hierarchy, and is this productive to have this play out in public, or is this indicative of the partisanship that we're seeing in the church at large?
When our bishops engage in the sport of politics, and that seems to overtake the urgent cry from our society for some moral clarity on these questions, I mean, why take any day off from advocating for the unborn? The unborn have no voice, and they are killed thousands a day, millions in our country. I want church leaders that will defend that life each and every time they have the opportunity to. There should be no day off for advocating for the unborn. I'm very disappointed that the Cardinal in Chicago believes that it's a seasonal question of defending life.
Well, look, immigration, for instance, is a prudential issue, okay? I mean, people can agree, on the particular policies or disagree. But the bishops, I know they would prefer open borders, a free exchange of people. But when you're talking about something like abortion or marriage, these are foundational, clear-cut moral issues. There is no middle way on these issues. As a Vatican cardinal advocated this week, shouldn't they speak out more forcefully, at least on these handful of issues that are very clear-cut, where there is no prudential judgment at play?
Well, I think for people like you and me, Raymond, who have kids that are trying to grow up in this most confusing of societies where almost every message they get, from music to entertainment to even the companies where their parents may work, these public companies that have turned hard left in their social policies, they actually are getting no support. The only place they can get support, it seems like, is from parents who are devout to the church and when they sit in pews. And what's tragic to me is these kids, they're brave, the ones that continue to hang in there and go to church, and they're holding on to their faith. But when these faith leaders are abandoning these kids because it's more politically correct to go on mute, we are not giving that life preserver that kid needs to get to the next stage in this life and to engage in their own, raising them their own families and handing off this most wonderful of gifts that we have, our faith. If church leaders won't do that, who will? Maybe this is a time for choosing. Maybe we'll have new leaders arise as the church has had in the past. God has a plan here, but I am so discouraged when I see church leaders go for the tall grass. This is not the time for that.
I want to, back up a little bit and talk about now former President Trump for a moment. This is a little bit of his farewell address. Listen.
I fought for you. I fought for your family. I fought for our country. Above all, I fought for America and all it stands for, and that is safe, strong, proud, and free. I go from this majestic place with a loyal and joyful heart, an optimistic spirit, and a supreme confidence that for our country and for our children, the best is yet to come. Thank you and farewell. God bless you. God bless the United States of America.
Matt, before he left the other day, President Trump also vowed to return in some form. What do you imagine his political future might look like? And can Republicans just ignore him and move on, as some on Capitol Hill seem to desire?
So I've talked to the president about this. He's not going to be leaving the stage as previous Republican presidents have. I can't think of a previous Republican president who kind of stayed engaged in the political fight. But President Trump is going to, and I don't know what exact shape that's going to take. But we will continue to hear from him. If Twitter bans him and other social media platforms ban him, he will still speak. And the more they go after him, the more they persecute him, the more half the country admires him. It's almost like an adhesive between the people in the country who liked him and his policies and the man. So I don't see that changing. And for Republicans on Capitol Hill who think somehow this whole MAGA episode was some temporary nightmare they had to just kind of live through, and now they can go back to John McCain and Mitt Romney Republican politics, I have news for them. That's not where Republicans, conservatives, and obviously MAGA supporters want to be. If we're ever to win the presidency again and do things like uphold life and religious freedom, it's going to be not because of the Republican Party, it's going to be because of this broader coalition. And people of faith are the central part of that coalition.
Well, it is curious, when you went into the Oval Office, Trump's Oval Office, there was not only a sculpture of Andrew Jackson on the credenza behind him, but a portrait of Andrew Jackson hanging on the wall. I've always thought of Trump as kind of this Jacksonian figure who was, you know, rough around the edges. Not everybody in Congress loved him, but the people, that particularly the kind of unwashed, if you will, in the minds of Washington, the people who don't have a voice out in the hinterlands, who are often overlooked, he became their champion. And I think that fighting spirit remains in him. We'll see what happens in the days ahead. But today, or rather earlier this week, both Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy are now calling for a 9/11-style commission to investigate what happened on the Capitol grounds on the 6th of January. Your thoughts on what that is and what it could mean to Trump's impeachment trial?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important because I've spent decades walking around Capitol Hill. I know the crevices and the corners, and it was a weird day in almost every way. I really admire the Capitol Hill police, but why were they so AWOL? Why was a group of unarmed criminals, people who shouldn't have done it, but why were they so easily able to overtake these authorities? I think everybody wants answers. You know, instead of canceling people and silencing them, we should be letting people talk more, and we should inform the American people more about what really happened. And Nancy Pelosi has an obligation to come forward with the lack of leadership that occurred on that day. We shouldn't just castigate those people who broke the law, but we should also hold people accountable who have authority and clearly seem to use that authority in a way that put people at risk.
Yeah, no, the violence was, you can't condone the violence. It was horrible.
No.
It shouldn't have happened. It's not a form of protest. I said that earlier this year. I'll say that now. We just can't have violence. But this trial, this impeachment trial, is still waiting in the wings. Does this help Biden's call for unity? And what's the end game here, do you think?
It's the opposite. I mean, basically, it's not President Trump who's on trial in the Senate. It's all of us. Because when they use language like, oh, the white supremacy, they're not talking about the sin of racism. They're talking about the fact that you could be Anglo-American and have power, have money, have a good job in society. They're saying somehow like that's a bad thing because they are so focused on the politics of identity, of race, of gender, if there is any gender, of sexual orientation, these types of things. That's how this whole movement, this whole Democratic Party, which has embraced socialism, that's how it animates itself. And so this conviction in the Senate, it's telling half the country who supported President Trump, it's telling them that there's something wicked about their politics, and they're making us all somehow be on the defensive because a couple of yahoos broke the law and did a terrible thing and breached the Capitol. We have to stop being on the defense. I'm a proud Republican. I'm a Catholic first, I'm a conservative second, I'm a Republican third, but I'm a proud Republican. The Republican Party was established to fight slavery, to give African Americans, to give former slaves their civil rights. We have been at the forefront of this movement, and we get put on the defense because so many people in the media and so many people on the left are very good at that. I refuse to be put on the defense of these questions. If we have questions of race in society, let's talk about it in a responsible way. But don't start off by calling me a white supremacist just because I'm trying to succeed in society and give my kids a good life.
But clearly this impeachment effort, Matt, is focused on Trump somehow instigating this insurrection on Capitol Hill. Can you impeach a former president on those grounds? And I mean, and is Congress going to go back and impeach George Bush for war crimes and Obama for Benghazi? I mean, I didn't realize you could impeach a guy who's already left office.
Or I got this crazy idea. What about impeaching Joe Biden and Barack Obama for using our intelligence assets to go after their political opponents and reporters, for auditing the Tea Party and the nonprofits that have a conservative philosophy? I mean, if we're going to go down this road of impeaching and then maybe even convicting our political opponents, it's never going to end. And look, if Joe Biden wants to be the president who heals us, he has an obligation to use his voice and tell his party to stop. Instead, he's choosing the opposite. He's acting like he has no role to play here. It'll undermine his primary theme that he can heal this country. He's going to put salt in this wound, and he's going to make it worse. And he's going to actually weaken himself from a political perspective. I know he won't take my advice. The smartest thing Joe Biden could do if he wants to be a healer, pardon Donald Trump, tell his party to stop going after political opponents. Stop going after the nuns who want to practice their faith. Don't use the IRS and HHS to go after people of faith. Stop this insanity. Be everyone's president. Yes, he'll be liberal, but don't use your power to go after your political opponents. That would be a step in the right direction.
Matt SCHLAPP, thank you for being here. We will check in with you in the days ahead.
Thanks, Raymond.
The March for Life in Washington, D.C. has been canceled this year. It was scheduled for January 29th. Now, leaders have blamed the cancellation on COVID-19 and the Capitol Hill riot on January 6th. Now, COVID didn't seem to shut down any other protests that raged at the apex of this crisis. But joining me now to discuss the future of the pro-life movement in the era of Catholic President Joe Biden is former co-chair of the Congressional Pro-Life Caucus, Congressman Dan Lipinski, and President of the Susan B. Anthony list, Marjorie Dannenfelser. Thank you both for being here. Now, a new administration has taken over, one that is not at all friendly to the pro-life movement. As I mentioned earlier, the USCCB issued a controversial statement about Biden's record on life. Where are we at this moment, Marjorie, as this new administration comes in?
Well, there's no question that on the federal level, we are on the complete defense. Without question, they will immediately move in and overturn every positive executive order that the pro-life movement, along with the past administration, built. When they have an opportunity, will get federal judges in that we don't like, without question, that are not pro-life. And, you know, in the name of Catholicism, they'll be speaking out for the, quote, pro-choice position, which of course doesn't exist within the church. So the bully pulpit of the presidency will be used for nefarious means that will undermine life. The real strength of the pro-life movement, however, I believe, and I know, is in the real world beyond the DC borders, where states are working very hard to pass laws that save lives that I believe now the court can really hear and perhaps uphold.
Dan, you were a Democratic lawmaker for years. Is there an understanding here, I guess, among the ranks of your former party, that there's political advantage to be gained by supporting things like the Hyde Amendment or the Mexico City policy? Are there Democrats who see the political opportunity there?
Well, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what President Biden decides to do. I agree with Marjorie. The executive orders are very likely to occur and to occur soon. I think the pro-life movement is going to, we need immediately to work to protect the Hyde Amendment. And that's going to mean, that means reaching out to Democrats in both the House and the Senate to protect it. But, you know, last Congress, Nancy Pelosi decided it wasn't politically a good move to go after the Hyde Amendment for whatever reason, whether that's because she knew President Trump would veto it or because it wouldn't get through the Senate. But I have to wonder if I don't think the votes are there to overturn Hyde, but we need to be very active in reaching out to those members, those Democratic members, to make sure that we do preserve Hyde.
And the Hyde Amendment, Congressman Lipinski, explain to people briefly, this is a prohibition on federal funds being used to support and pay for abortions, correct?
Correct. So it's no taxpayer funding for abortion, but the Hyde Amendment has to be attached to the appropriations bills every year. So it has to affirmatively be placed on. It's not a matter of a new law repealing it. So that's what we need to make sure that we're fighting for when it comes to Congress.
Yeah, I scratch my head, Congressman Lipinski, as to why Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, when they had both houses, didn't make a law to codify this idea that you don't pay for abortions federally. They should have done that. Again, missed opportunity. Republicans have a real problem with governance, it seems to me. They're great on the opposition, governance not so much. There are people within the pro-life movement who feel that the association with Donald Trump has somehow damaged that movement. In a recent interview, a CNA interview, Catholic theologian and former Democrats for Life member Charles Comacy said, "Proximity to power in order to do genuine good in the short run is a huge temptation, and those of us who never supported Trump should acknowledge the good things that were done. It would have been difficult enough to try to undo the damage that having the pro-life movement associated with Trump, even without the assault on the Capitol, but now the task is absolutely gargantuan. It is far too late to sever ties now." Marjorie, has Trump damaged this movement, or is this the left looking to shut down anyone who's pro-life?
It's just breathtaking, that statement, defying all of reality, what has happened over the last 4 years, where the country has been transformed into one where our courts can actually hear the argument, potentially overturn Roe versus Wade within a relatively short period of time, possibly, and somehow this is irreparable damage. Well, it's damage perhaps to, I think, what some people consider our perfect and amicable and pleasing reputations and what feels comfortable. Yes, it's damaging to our comfort levels, but you can ask any person who ever ran a successful human rights battle like William Witherspoon, like the abolitionists and others, that there will be times when people say, you are just anathema. You are really not one of us. You're not part of our crowd. But we are so grateful for the fact that they did what they did. Right now, we are looking at potentially, when it comes to the most important font, the font for every other right, the right to life, could possibly be preserved in our because of their rootedness in our founding documents, and that we could see the overturn of Roe versus Wade is the only argument to make right now. Our reputations, what people think about us, we tell our kindergartners every day, don't worry about that, do the right thing, move forward. Look, Raymond, we're definitely on the defense. We're definitely on the Hyde Amendment. That debate is definitely a concerning one. And the Democrats now have embraced the most extreme form of abortion absolutism there is, that we all pay for it, domestically and here. But you know what? The most important thing that's happening, and I don't think that'll prevail. I think Congressman Lipinski is right. But where we will prevail, where the great hope is out in the states where real people are letting their voices be known through great governors and a very narrow margin in the House and the Senate and a barely winning presidency is not going to change the reality that is moving forward in our nation. Great hope and great strength in the pro-life movement.
Congressman Lipinski, your take on trying to connect somehow the pro-life movement to this mob riot at the Capitol. I mean, I didn't see sidewalk counselors storming the House cloakroom there. Maybe I missed that part.
Well, that is a terrible. I mean, look, the riot at the Capitol was awful, but trying to then attach everyone who someone may not like to that is, really irresponsible. It is wrong. This was not the pro-lifers attacking the House of Representatives. But look, moving forward, we need to have a new face to the pro-life movement. I'm hopeful that's going to be Amy Coney Barrett. I don't think we could have a better face of the pro-life movement than her, and I'm very hopeful in that. We know if Roe v. Wade is overturned, this is going to become a much tougher battle. It's going to have to be waged in the states, and we are also going to need pro-life Democrats, and we need to build up. The Democratic Party at the top is terrible on pro-life, but still it's 25 to 30% of Democratic voters, and we need to build up pro-life Democrats.
No, I agree with you. Look, our governor here in Louisiana, John Bel Edwards, is a pro-life Democrat, but he's one of the very few. He's also a pro-gun Democrat, and this is why he won re-election, by the way. So, look, I think, particularly for Catholics, you got to stay on the issue. Forget the party, stay on the issue. And if Democrats were smart, they would want to be a governing party forever and drop this litmus test on abortion. They become captive to Planned Parenthood and a few of these groups, and frankly, it's distorting their long-term political possibilities here. Marjorie, I found this CNA piece frankly ridiculous on whether the alliance with Trump has damaged the pro-life movement. Would it have been better if Hillary Clinton had been president for pro-lifers?
Well, you make the exact point. In politics, you generally have two choices, one candidate or the other. You have one that completely moved the Hyde Amendment into debate again, as if any majorities are ever going to embrace that position, and who promised that she would only have Supreme Court justices that would affirm and uphold Roe versus Wade. And then you have on the other side a man who made commitments that many people didn't believe or take them at face value. But he committed to exactly the opposite and to upholding a pro-life presidency and a pro-life country. And he did exactly that. He followed through on those promises. Maybe he made some people uncomfortable along the way. And certainly the very end didn't feel like ending strong. However, decades from now, we will have forgotten many of these things. And we will have a much stronger jurisprudence that will be protecting the lives of little boys and girls who are intended for this world every single day. And so it was the right thing to do if you voted for the pro-life candidate for president and every other candidate that is a pro-life candidate across the country.
Dan, you did not attend the March for Life in 2018 when you found out that President Trump was going to share a video address there. You said at the time you did not want to be in, quote, the potentially morally compromised situation, presumably of sharing a stage with a president whose words were unpredictable and even offensive. Rhetoric aside, he has been the most pro-life president in the history of the country. I mean, that's not to be disputed. We now have a Catholic president pledged to repeal the Hyde Amendment, codify Roe v. Wade into law. Your thoughts? And should Catholics, including politicians, avoid sharing the stage with Biden, given his anti-life policies and his stated agenda?
Well, my concern about President Trump was, as you said, you never know what's going to come out of his mouth. I agree. No president in the history of our country has come close to doing as much when it comes to executive orders and the courts to protect the unborn, and no question about that. My concern is that he became the face of the pro-life movement. I think that certainly hurt me in my primary for President Trump. And in so many ways, it gave the other side the opportunity to say, that is the type of person who is pro-life in the things in his life and the things that he said. I think that was damaging, but we move beyond that. Move beyond that right now. And that's why I say, look, we need to win hearts and minds. That's something that's very important. I know Marjorie has been involved in conversations about post-Roe v. Wade and what we need to be preparing for. And I think that's very important for us to do. I think Joe Biden, let me say that the statement by the USCCB I thought was spot on. I think all Catholics should read that. Everything that's been talked about counts about abortion, the Catholic position on abortion and gender and religious freedom, all that I stand with the Catholic Church on, that came about halfway through. But that's all you're reading about. It was a very balanced view of what a Catholic who is in public life and public office should stand for. And we need to pray that President Biden has a change of heart on these issues.
All right, yeah. On Monday, Speaker Nancy Pelosi joined Hillary Clinton for a podcast. I want to play this for both of you because the issue of abortion and President Trump came up. I want your reaction.
Now, there's one other element that I have been talking about for a long time that gives me great grief as a Catholic. I think that Donald Trump is president because of the a woman's right to choose. When he signed that paper saying, these are the judges that I will appoint That was the dog whistle to the evangelicals, to the Catholics, and all the rest. A woman will not have the right to choose. And many of these people are very good people. That's just their point of view. But they were willing to sell the whole democracy down the river for that one issue.
Willing to sell the whole democracy down the river for that one issue. Now, this is the line you hear from partisan Catholics, particularly on the left. Marjorie, your reaction?
My reaction is that in all of politics, in all of the time that I've been involved as a Catholic convert and as a pro-life advocate, I have never been so annoyed, deeply offended, appalled at what a self-described devout Catholic would say about people who took the pro-life position important as preeminently important, which is exactly the way the church itself describes it, and that somehow we are undermining the Constitution, that somehow we're bad patriots, that we're not helpful in forming a democratic republic because we care so much about the pro-life position is outrageous. It's outrageous that she, as a private citizen, would take that to the public sphere. The piece of paper that she refers to, I know very well what it was. It was the commitment that he made to us at the Susan B. Anthony list, along with a couple of other commitments, that he would only appoint pro-life Supreme Court justices and federal judges along the line. That's what she's talking about. That is the biggest change that was made in his entire administration, and what he will be, if not remembered for, what later we will thank him for. And that she thinks that somehow that was an abrogation of that for Catholics, it was an abrogation of our responsibility in public life to vote for him, over Hillary Clinton, is just making the church in her own image. It is not the Catholic Church that she's a part of, if that's what she thinks that is how we make our decisions as private people and public people in political life.
Congressman Lipinski, this so-called one issue only applies to people of a certain political stripe. I mean, look, I have a lot of friends on the left and the right who they're enraged about public executions, about the death penalty, and they're rightly enraged about that. But there were 17 executions last year. The CDC reports there were only over 600,000, probably closer to 800,000 abortions last year. So shouldn't they summon the same outrage over those lives that were tossed away? I mean, how do you get out of the political back and forth and focus everyone on the human rights dimension of this, no matter the politics?
Well, two things I'd say. First, I think Speaker Pelosi needs to take a step back and look at this and say, well, if all those voters are voting, put Donald Trump in, and I made this, I said this for years. If all these people put Donald Trump in because of the radical position that the Democratic Party has taken on abortion, Democrats should learn and to back off of that radical position. And that's the case that I've been making to the party over the last few years as the party has become more radical on that. But the second thing is, look, we need as Catholics to be Catholic first before party. And that's what I've always said. That's the message that I have. I think people who are talking about our tribalism in this country and all the problems that it's causing, I say Catholics have the way out. We can show the way forward if we are, to have the courage to be Catholic first before choosing one of these two tribes or one of these political parties. And I think that should be, that's my message to everyone out there.
Congressman, before I end this, I want to move on. I have one other topic I want to talk about. Do you feel you were targeted by your party because of your pro-life stance? I mean, you were the last of the Mohicans. I don't think there are any other pro-life Democrats in the House, right?
Well, there's no one left who's always with us. But some there were sometimes. But yes, I mean, no question. I mean, there would not have been $6 million spent against me in the 2018 and 2020 primary if I were not pro-life. That was directly where most of that money came from. I mean, that it has just become a litmus test, the number one litmus test, it seems, for the Democratic Party. And go back to the statement of Nancy Pelosi. If she were if she's worried about the Democratic Party, how about the party take a step back from that? But
well, next time I hear this, if you'll pardon the phrase, malarkey from people saying you're a one-issue voter or you can't be a one-issue voter, I'm going to say one word back to them: Lipinski. That's all I'm going to say back to them, because this was the one issue that they decided to take you to the mat for, even though you were with them on so much of the Democratic agenda here.
Think how absurd it would sound to say the death of another, the death of your neighbors makes you a one-issue person. It's absurd to say that. So anybody who does say it doesn't really believe that it's a death of a human being. I mean, that's the logic of it.
Yeah, and it's not one issue. It's one issue that defines all the other issues of caring for the poor, the environment, capital punishment. If we can't agree that the taking of an innocent human life is important to us as a society, then we can't allow that thinking to bleed in all, pardon the pun, bleed into all the other issues of the day. That informs everything else. So it's not one issue. It's the predominant issue that affects so many, like dominoes. I want to get into one other thing before we leave, the policy changes we can expect from this administration. This past July, Joe Biden had this to say about the Little Sisters of the Poor when they won the Supreme Court case which upheld an exemption for the sisters from that contraceptive mandate, obligating them to provide contraceptives and abortifacient services for their employees. He said, if I'm elected, I will restore the Obama-Biden policy that existed before the Hobby Lobby ruling, providing an exemption for houses of worship and an accommodation for nonprofit organizations with religious missions. What can we expect here? Very quickly, Dan.
Yes, that's a good question, and that's something that President Biden really needs to be pushed on by the Little Sisters of the Poor in the Catholic Church. His words suggest he would protect them, but we know, reading between the lines, that policy did not protect the conscience of those of Little Sisters of the Poor and others who did not want to provide the abortifacient.
Marjorie?
Yeah, well, right out of the box, when the Supreme Court decided that last summer, Biden said he was going to take him back to court if he could. I mean, I think it's pretty clear what he's going to do. And it really does come down to conscience. Should we be forced to pay for things? Should we be forced to be involved in things? Should we, no matter our religious convictions, be forced to engage in activity that we believe is the death of another human being? The Democratic Party left Catholics, walked away from him a long time ago, doesn't have any tolerance for any other position. So that's what we can see. The Little Sisters hauled in front of court again.
Well, look, I agree with both of you. I think Joe Biden has a golden opportunity here to, like Donald Trump, operate and govern outside of the ideological framework of his party. And Donald Trump did that. He broke a lot of conventions in the Republican Party. I think Biden needs to similarly move to the center and defy some of the conventions that have been set up there. It would serve him well. By the way, Dr. Fauci, who's going to be speaking to the WHO, in his prepared remarks says Biden will be lifting the Mexico City policy and allowing abortion funding abroad. So we'll keep monitoring all of this and check in with you in the days ahead. Dan Lipinski, Marjorie Dannenfelser, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On January 13th, Open Doors, an international NGO advocating on behalf of Christians, persecuted Christians, released an annual World Watch List. Now, this list assesses 50 countries where Christians are facing severe types of persecution. Now, during the reporting period between October 2019 and September 2020, more than 340 million Christians were living in countries where they suffer discrimination or persecution because of their faith. That's 1 in 8 Christians worldwide, and in Africa, that's 1 in 6. Joining me now to discuss this and much more is Director of the Center for Religious Freedom at the Hudson Institute, Nina Shea. Nina, thank you for being here. On Monday, a Nigerian priest, Father John Gabakan, was apparently found dead. He was killed by machete while traveling with his brother. There was another story I saw of a priest who was kidnapped and released a day later. Why are we seeing this aggression toward clergy? And are all these kidnappings and killings the work of Boko Haram?
No, they're not all the work of Boko Haram. There are many forces at play in Nigeria that are targeting the churches. And these are extremist, Islamic extremist groups. Boko Haram is one of them. The Islamic State is also there. And they were responsible, according to the Vatican News, for killing upwards of 11 Christians, execution style, on Christmas or the day after. So, I mean, this has been, as Bishop Kuka of Sokoto, Catholic bishop there, very courageous man, said that there's been endless bloodletting, that the country is just wrapped in desolation, that their roads to the graveyards are busier than the roads to the farms. And what he means is that there is a targeting, it's a open season on the Christians there. Muslims who do not go along with their dictates are also targeted. We saw that in December with the kidnapping of over 344 schoolboys, mostly Muslim, from a science school. And it was because that kind of Western education is forbidden by Boko Haram. That's what their name means. Western books are forbidden.
Wow. Right. Last month, Pope Francis appointed the bishop you just mentioned, Nigerian Bishop Matthew Hassan Kuka, as a member of the dicastery for the promotion of human integral development. What do you make of that appointment, Nina? It feels like it was done to protect the bishop.
I believe that's right. I think that the Vatican is stepping in to try to give him some protection. He's very high profile. He's been extremely involved in dialogue with Muslims and with the Sultan of Sokoto, where he is from, his diocese. And things have gotten so bad, the persecution, and I think you mentioned open doors. They said that 10 Christians a day are being killed in Nigeria. That he has started, this bishop has started becoming very vocal, and he's becoming the leader of the protest movement against the killings for religious reasons. So I undoubtedly think that that was what the Vatican is trying to do. He's a very admirable and brave, courageous man in these circumstances.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of emails from our African viewers about this genocide in Nigeria, and they've been asking us to cover this. And I don't know, frankly, why we're not hearing more coverage from this region of the world and what's happening to these people. The president of Nigeria has said that Bishop Kuka must be allowed to practice his faith and politics. What do you make of that statement, Nina?
I think the president is on the defensive a little bit. A lot, because Bishop Kuka has essentially accused him of favoring his own northern relatives and tribe in the north of Nigeria. He calls it northern hegemony, and that he is actually funding and playing ball, playing a game, playing Boko Haram's game by funding them and by essentially giving them ransom for kidnapping after kidnapping, but letting them have free reign. There's also the Fulani herdsmen that are, a faction of them has become radicalized, and that is the president's own ethnic composition. He's a Fulani, as are many, and there are 40 million Fulani in Africa, so not all of them are radicalized. But this president is not doing enough to protect his own citizens, and that is what the bishop has accused him of. Also, Raymond, the State Department under the Trump administration in December named Nigeria as one of the 10 worst countries in the world for religious freedom, that it is a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act, a CPC. So this is the world's worst list for the U.S. government, and Nigeria is now on it for the first time.
Well, Nigerian Christians, as you mentioned, they're facing violent attacks from Islamic extremist groups, Boko Haram, Fulani Muslim militia, a Daesh affiliate, especially in northern Nigeria and the Middle Belt. What is the president of Nigeria doing to get rid of Boko Haram? Is he doing anything? I mean, they're terrorizing these Christians as well as Muslims. And where does the U.S. government take that recommendation that you just mentioned? You know, Nigeria is now on this watch list, but what does it mean? What might it mean in policy?
Okay, well, Nigeria is on more than a watch list now. It's on the short list of the world's worst persecutors, on the CPC list, which is a step up now. It's, from last year when it was just put on the watch list. The U.S. government has not done enough. It doesn't really recognize what is happening there. It talks about banditry. It talks about the analysis on the State Department Religious Freedom Report, and this is so disappointing, is that it is a class warfare, a sort of a Marxian analysis of a socio-religious, socio-economic warfare between farmers and migrant herders. And in fact, it's a religious extremism is part of the mix. There may be a climate change issue, which the State Department emphasizes in the Religious Freedom Report, but there's also undoubtedly a religious persecution issue. These sheep herders, these cattle herders are coming in yelling Allahu Akbar, targeting Christian pastors and priests and other Christians. There's forcible conversion, abducting women as sex slaves. I mean, it's a repeat of what we saw in the Middle East with ISIS, frankly. The U.S. government should be clarifying what this is about. Former Ambassador Brownback now, he mentioned at a press conference that this the reason Nigeria is on the list is because these things are happening by non-state actors, but the government is doing very little about it. And it's because of that impunity they got to live.
I'm almost out of time, Nina, but before he left, Secretary Pompeo designated China and what's happening to those Uyghur Muslims as a genocide. What do you expect from this new administration, this Biden administration, when it comes to defending religious freedom, both here in the U.S. and abroad? Very quickly.
Well, we don't know. It's now that they have agreed with the Pompeo designation of China as being a genocide actor. And it's going to be up to them now, the Biden administration, to decide what to do about it. There's a huge moral stigma. It's the most heinous crime in human rights is genocide. So there will be a burden on them. It'll be one of the things that they've got should be doing in the first 100 days, frankly.
Well, we will leave it there. Nina Shade, thank you for your fine reporting on this and persecution of Christians all over the world. You can find more information at hudson.org, and we will be praying for the poor people in Nigeria and around the world suffering from this persecution. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Raymond.
The World Over is now available as a podcast. Download us at iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. That's all the time we have for now. Be sure to catch us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo. Bye now.